Good evening and welcome to Access Iowa City, a program about the rehabilitation and independent living movements in southeast Iowa. Access to Iowa City is brought to you by a generous contribution from the Noon Pilots Club of Iowa City for Johnson County, and a collaboration between the Extend the Dream Foundation, Access to Independence, and the Center for Disabilities and Development, as well as efforts from all the hardworking folks at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, President of the Board of Directors of Access to Independence, Vice Chair of the Johnson County Mental Health and Disability Services Planning Council, and an individual who's lived with significant disability for over 41 years. Today we're thrilled to be coming to you from Uptown Bill's, and our guest tonight is the Executive Director of the Extended Dream Foundation, Tom Gilsenan, and we'll be talking about Extended Dream, Uptown Bills, Wild Bills, and all the rest of the bits and pieces of the Bills empire. And as always, our co-host, Mr. Keith Ruff.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay, Tom, since we're at Uptown Bills, why don't we start with what it is and all the things that go on and some of the characters who stop by periodically who aren't appearing on shows?
All right. Uptown Bill's is a coffee house and a bookstore and a performance venue, and it celebrates its 11th birthday next week on Labor Day.
Cool.
We're having a big bash, which includes a birthday party and a fair and flea market across the street, and music all day, starting at 9 a.m. until dark. Different band every hour on that day.
On Monday?
On Monday, September 3rd. The original idea for the whole, as you called it, Bill's Empire, came from Bill Sachter, who's in the picture behind us. Bill is the man with the beard, and he came to Iowa City in the early 1970s with a young couple, Barry and Bev Morrow. A lot of B's in here. Barry, Bev, Bill. And Bill had spent 50 years in one of those big old state hospitals. He was in Minnesota, at Faribault, Minnesota, and was sent back to the community when he was about 60. He came to Iowa City with the Morrows, and Iowa City's a lot smaller town than Minneapolis. And so the question was, what's Bill going to do for a job? What emerged was a small coffee shop in North Hall, originally about the size of a broom closet, and it caught on. And it eventually moved into the room it's in now, 321 North Hall, and Bill became like a local celebrity, and the coffee shop flourished. Barry thought it would be nice to write a story about Bill. Well, the story ended up becoming a movie for television called Bill. And that starred Mickey Rooney, who's also in the picture behind us. Mickey Rooney played Bill, and Dennis Quaid played Barry. And the movie was a big hit and received a lot of attention. And Bill received hundreds and hundreds of letters from all over the country from people. Since it was in the School of Social Work, the school had to hire someone to answer Bill's mail. So he had a part-time assistant to help with the mail. And almost immediately, work began on a sequel called Bill on His Own. Same main characters, but it also featured smaller roles for Lyle Lovett and Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt played a social work student in that second film. So unfortunately, Bill died shortly after that, but the coffee shop stayed and remained, and it's still there today. You can go visit it on weekdays. And it's still the same mission to provide employment to individuals with disabilities and lift up the idea of abilities awareness in the community. Uptown Bills grew out of there. You might call us the bigger, badder Bills, and includes what you see in this building, and then also some projects about a mile away in the Towncrest district by the Hy-Vee there. So when originally Uptown Bill's was located at the corner of Gilbert and Court Streets. And 2 years ago, we moved to this location, and we're atop public access television. And it's because we're on top of them that we could actually have you here today and have the cameras right here with us. We do this, maybe 3 or 4 times a month, do a show here. And we do a live show probably twice a month, right from Uptown Bill's.
Tom, what are the goals of your many entrepreneurs that work here?
The same as the original coffee shop, which is to provide employment to individuals with disabilities, kind of a demonstration project, and also to lift up the idea of abilities awareness around the community. So what we often say for any events here, we say open to all ages and all abilities. And whatever it might be, whether it's an open mic or a spoken word or a concert, that there's access and opportunities for everyone. And we work really hard to make that happen.
And when Bill came out of the institution in Minnesota, which of course was long before the attitudes toward folks with disabilities had changed as they are now, he had gone in when he was like 5 years old or something, hadn't he?
7 years old. He had lived in a neighborhood just north of downtown Minneapolis. And they lived in a 2-story wood frame building. His parents ran a grocery store. And they lived upstairs, and the grocery store was downstairs. It was near the corner of Aldrich and Plymouth. But when Bill's dad died, it became hard to make ends meet. And Bill had started school, but it was clear he wasn't progressing as much as the other youth. And the county social services recommended that Bill be sent off, which was not uncommon, especially in poor families at that time. When Bill moved to Faribault, there were several hundred other children and young adults like him there. And eventually there were more than 3,000 people living there in that state hospital. Now Minnesota was not alone. All the other states had a state hospital too. South Dakota had 2. It had both a state hospital run by the state, and then it had a separate hospital, mental hospital, that was run by the federal government for Native Americans.
Sure. As you say, all the other states.
That wasn't the original idea. There was a woman named Dorothea Dix, who in the late 19th century had proposed that just like there are hospitals for physical illnesses, there should be one for mental illnesses too, including mental disabilities, physical disabilities of the mind. And she went around to probably half the states and proposed this, and the states followed through. The state hospital in Minnesota was first proposed in the very first session of the Minnesota State Legislature. So this seemed like a far-sighted idea, but the way it turned out was more like a warehouse for individuals with disabilities of all kinds.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I should say, people who went into facilities then seldom came out.
That's right. That's right. There's some evidence that there were possibilities that along the way that Bill would be sent home. But of course there wasn't any home for him to go to because his mother and his sisters had long moved away, and in fact they'd been advised not to be in touch with him or to go visit him. And so he was, as far as his family was concerned, he was lost or gone.
True.
Tom, as a person in academics, have you noticed a change in attitude towards disabled people from when Bill was in the institution up to now?
Oh, sure. You know, before I came to Iowa City, I was a high school teacher in Minneapolis. In fact, I taught in the neighborhood where Bill grew up. And one of the things I noticed was that at the local elementary school, I took junior high students to volunteer at the elementary school. And there were particular classroom we volunteered in was a combination kindergarten, first grade.
Okay.
And there were people of all abilities in the classroom. There was one little guy who actually came in a tiny hospital bed to class. And the class, nobody thought anything of this. It was just, well, that's just the way first grade is. It was extraordinary to see that. Whereas even the older students, the junior high and high school ones I was working with, were struck by this, how unusual this seemed to them. But to the little cruisers, it was, well, that's just the way the world works. And so, yes, striking changes over time.
But I think it's interesting that when children are introduced to most anything at a fairly young age, they get comfortable with it very quickly until somewhere down the line an adult mentions something that alerts them to, oh, there's a difference with this person, or there's a difference with this, and whether it's with people of color or different religions or people with disabilities, whatever. Because as Keith and I are out and about, little kids come up to you and they ask questions, and they have no intention of insulting or hurting feelings, but when they see you moving along in a chair, number one, they want to know where they can get one, and number two, they want to know, why you do it. And it's, as I say, it's not to be mean, nasty, or whatever, and they don't even have to understand the reason that you give them.
They're very curious. And it's a shame that parents like to turn that curiosity off when they should allow it to extend itself.
Well, one of the initial changes that led to the bill ultimately coming out of the state hospital was a group of parents who started an organization called ARC. And ARC started actually in several different parts of the country about the same time. But this is a group of parents in Minneapolis who said, so what's going to happen when our children get bigger, and why can't they go to public schools? And this was in the mid-1950s. And they were the first people to go to the state legislature in Minnesota and say, hey, how about providing services for our children, and how about changing the way things work, because we don't want them to go off. We want people to stay, we want our children to stay in the communities, their own communities. And that eventually propelled the state legislature to say this hospital is not a good idea. And a lot of other states too, was the voices of parents and friends and eventually professionals.
Sure. And it's so interesting that in the 50s, parents and other folks knew that this wasn't right. It just wasn't the right thing to do to people. But still today, we're struggling to get that message out. We're struggling to get more people into home and community-based services, even though it's been shown time and time again that people do better when they're in their own home or living with their family or some kind of a living situation, not with 500 other people. Their health is better, they're happier, and it's less expensive. I mean, figures show it costs about 1/3 the amount to house somebody in a non-institutional setting than it does in a home and community-based setting with the supports that they need.
And I've noticed, and I didn't mean to cut you off, that the maturity level is much higher if they're not in the institution. In the institution, they never seem to grow maturely.
That was one of the questions that came up with Bill, was it was probably likely that he could have learned some basic reading and some basic skills like how to use a telephone, how to read bus and street signs, things like that. But because he was never offered that opportunity, he never did. He did figure out how to ride the bus in Iowa City.
Yes.
It's kind of fun. He would take the bus, and in the beginning, Barry would follow along behind in a car to make sure he got off at the right stop, which didn't always happen. And he had a little card that said which bus line he was riding on and where he was going as well. But a lot of things like that. And he struggled. He really wanted to learn how to use the telephone. Remember, he was using the rotary dial phones, but he never did quite figure that out. One of the people he wanted to call was his sister, who he connected with again when she was quite old and was living in Florida. But he never could figure out how to dial the phone. And in the second Bill movie, there is a little anecdote in which he gets the character played by Helen Hunt to try to help him call the nursing home where his sister lives and see if he can talk to her.
From what I know of Bill, and I met him a couple times, if he only had the extra attention younger, he would have been quite interesting. Though, not that he wasn't, but he would really grow quicker.
Yes, if given more opportunities when he was younger. And that's, as you mentioned, Terry, the whole idea of growing up in a community. You have all of these different influences that help you grow.
What
and if you get put away, you don't have those.
What I really loved about Bill is his love of kids.
Yes, yes.
And how gentle he was with them.
We have 2 or 3 pictures here in the coffee shop that show him with children at various times. And I think you know he played Santa each year. Now, not just for an afternoon or something. He played Santa for the whole month of December. And he would wear his Santa suit. So imagine Santa on the bus next to you, riding off to the university and riding home. There's one fun story. He went to one year to Luther College in Decorah around this time, around Christmas time, and he went and he gave some talks during the day and met with people, and then there was some kind of event in the evening, and he showed up in his Santa suit, played Santa, and they sang songs and so on. And then when they left, he still had his Santa suit on, and Bill was with Tom Walls, and Bill said to Tom, "You promised me we could go out and have a beer if things went well all day." Well, in Decorah at 9 o'clock at night, on a weeknight, it's a hard task to find a bar that's open. Well, they found this little neighborhood bar and went in and got their beer. And Tom Walls says, I couldn't figure out, everybody was looking at me kind of funny. And he said, I didn't realize till we walked out and one person at the bar said, "Good night, Santa," that he still had the suit on because he would, as I said, he would wear it all day. Now, it's ironic because Bill was Jewish, but as our local rabbi, Jeff Portman, says, he was an equal opportunity religion kind of guy. He went to the synagogue on Friday night. He went often to the Catholic church, and then he went with May, his landlady, to the Baptist church as well. So, and in each case, he prayed pretty much the same prayer. It's like a cross between something in Hebrew and the Lord's Prayer and his own words.
Well, let's hope right now that with today's situation, we won't run into many situations like Bill being put away.
One hopes not. Yeah.
I hope not.
There's still lots of work to be done. We heard about some of this. We hosted a meeting in connection with the United Nations Convention on People with Disabilities a few months ago, and we found that there's still some places in the U.S. and lots of places around the world where attitudes have changed only a little bit. And so there's still lots of work to be done, and we figure we have a role in that, which is why we're still here.
Well, and the whole thing actually carries forward to today, where if you're living in an institution, you have little choice, so there's not a whole lot of expectations of you. And so if there's, we all know if you're in school and there are no expectations of you, your chances of learning much are slim and none.
And you're not going to grow.
And unfortunately, so many folks with disabilities even today don't have expectations placed on them by their families or by medical personnel, but most importantly, not by themselves. And so if you don't have an expectation that, at some point you're going to have to get a job, some point you're going to have to live apart from your family and that, then you very much settle. If your family doesn't think that you're going to do any of that, they don't put the expectations. And I've talked to families of lots of folks with disabilities, and said, well, what's the plans for this child? What are they going to do when they grow up? Well, they'll probably live with us, and then ultimately they'll have to go someplace or go with a sibling. And I said, well, why? That makes no sense. I said, is that the expectation for your other children? Well, no. I said, well, why should it be any different? Has this child proven to you that they won't be able to work? Or that, they won't be able to at least partially take care of themselves? Well, no. So, one of the most frustrating things, and Keith and I and other folks have discussed this a lot, is people with disabilities frequently have to prove they can do something before they're allowed to try.
Yes.
Whereas the regular population is allowed to fail and fail and fail and fail and fail again
And no one
until
cares.
they finally get it right.
And no one cares.
Now
I don't think it's a care, but it doesn't surprise anybody when somebody doesn't succeed at something their first time around. And folks with disabilities should get the same opportunity. And that Bill's opportunity, once he came out, worked a variety of jobs.
He tried several
Didn't he?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know in the movie he was working at a country club, dishwashing and that, until he came to Iowa City and found the little niches with the coffee shop. There are all kinds of things out there that folks with disabilities could do if given the chance.
What bothers me, Terry and Tom, is the ADA has been around 20-some odd years, and attitude has changed very little.
Well, our friend, one of the people long connected with the original Wild Bills was Bob Finch. And Bob was the person really instrumental in getting music started. And music has long been connected, as just about anybody you can think of was in the Iowa City music scene has played at Wild Bills or Uptown Bills, going back for some years. But Bob used to say, he said, we just have to drop the whole idea of disabilities. And he said, we just talk about abilities awareness. We all have abilities. We all need to be aware of each other's abilities. So he had a little speech he would give before shows. And he, was one of the organizers, the original organizers of the ADA celebration in the summer. And it was down on the Ped Mall. And he would get his musician friends to come down and play with him. He himself was a musician. I've forgotten where he's living now, Clinton or Burlington, but as I said, he would have us do away entirely with abilities.
It's more attitudes
Dissing
like
abilities, I
Yeah.
guess he would
that. More
say.
attitudes like that that we certainly need.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think, the other enterprises that are not present where you are today include a vintage shop with antiques and collectibles and a few other things. And then something called Mix Workshop. This actually began with Bill. One of the ideas with Bill was to see how he could do refinishing furniture. That didn't work out too well. In fact, they almost burned down North Hall one day. But it was an idea that keeps coming back in different ways. And now it's called Mick's Workshop after the key person in that project, Mick. And then a little project has grown out of that called Ramp. And the original idea there was that the people involved would build ramps like the one that comes up to our stage, or bigger ramps like the one that comes up to our front door outside. And it's grown in all sorts of different ways, and hasn't quite settled into the core work. But again, another idea. And one of the things about Extend the Dream is it's continually trying new ventures to see. And a number of those that started within the organization have been spun off and are existing out on their own somewhere.
Micro businesses.
Yeah, well, and in some ways this very show is an example of that.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, let's hope the next 20 years we can make a little more progress toward acclimation with the entire community.
How about we hope for lots more
Yeah,
progress?
that would
Not a
be
little
good.
more, lots more.
Well, and you know, the thing to consider is Bill was an exception to the rule at the time. That rule really doesn't exist so much anymore, but there are still thousands and thousands of people across the country who could benefit from the opportunity to get out and just having, you know, their Barry Morrow or their whoever else to help them and look after them a little and give them the opportunity. And what might all those people be able to accomplish? If all of them had a couple little micro enterprises, or don't know whether they'll all get movies, but you know,
Yeah.
Bill became quite a celebrity with that. And you know, Bill was also in 1977 or 78, now I forget, was named the Handicapped Iowan of the Year, and also went to DC for the Handicapped American Award.
That's right.
Well, we've just about run out of time as usual. It's always fun having you on, Tom, and
Thank you.
talking about this stuff.
Nice to chat with both of you.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next week.